Welcome, fellow horror hounds, and welcome to the latest episode of Talk and Stalk, your unholy home for horror. Obviously, it's been quite some time since I've recorded a video. I think it's actually been over a month now. Withdrawal symptoms have been slowly setting in, but at the end of the day, I've had to take time out. I'm currently going through having a bit of a hard time at the moment with things and just really struggling to deal with things at the moment. But I just thought I'd like to give my brief thoughts on Malignant, the new James Wans directed film that I've actually just got back from the cinema seeing. And obviously, needless to say, I'm in a completely different venue at the moment, having to use my phone as opposed to, using a laptop. And yeah. Malignant. Now, I went into this film with, my expectations weren't exactly sky high. I will admit, I've actually liked a lot of James Wans films, as generic formulaic horror goes. I like The Conjuring, I like Conjuring 2, I like Insidious, 2004's Saw. Hell, there's people that would probably crucify me for saying this, but I actually like Dead Silence as well in 2007. Now, when it was actually revealed that James Wan was actually going to be directing a movie that was very much going to be, he was kind of turning his attention to giallo and very much kind of 80s horror, that kind of had me excited. I'm actually a huge giallo fan. The works of Dario Argento, Sergio Martino, some of Mario Bava's films as well. And I'm just going to quickly go off the bat and say this, that, like I said, I went into this film not exactly with high expectations. I think you pretty much kind of know what you're getting from a James Wan film. You could probably expect jump scares every 5 minutes or whatever. Admittedly, for the most part, I find that his jump scares are actually, I'm all for jump scares as long as they're well executed. But the issue I have sometimes with horror is that some movies are just over-reliant on them. There has to be some kind of organic build up to them. I don't like jump scares for the sake of jump scares. But anyway, like I said, I like The Conjuring and Conjuring 2 for what they are. Now, I've been hearing very kind of mixed reactions about this film. I've heard some people say they really liked it, and some people think that this is one of the worst goddamn films out there. I'm going to say this. As a giallo fan, there was a lot of stuff in this movie that I really appreciated. The music is goddamn awesome. I absolutely love the music in this film. It's very giallo inspired, very Goblin-esque. Goblin, great scores for Deep Red, Tenebrae, Suspiria, being my all-time favourite Argento film. The music in this film is just fantastic. I absolutely love the goddamn score. And I'll say this, and the visual aesthetics are fantastic. People can say what they want about James Wan. I think he's great with visuals. His movies do have kind of a definite polish. Yes, they're very mainstream horror. I fully get that. But like with Suspiria and 77, there's a great colour palette that's used during various moments of this movie. There was a lot of stuff in there that I really liked as a giallo fan. Black-clad killer, black-gloved. There's some kills in there that are pretty brutal. And people were talking to me about this film, telling me about this film, about how batshit crazy it is. That this isn't your typical kind of James Wan. Yes, there are jump scares and that, but James Wan does something very different with this movie, in fact. And it's really the third act of the movie. I'm not going to go into spoilers, but the third act of the movie really goes all out. It really does get batshit crazy. In fact, I really don't want to go into it. This basically becomes kind of an action movie, a martial arts movie in the final act. It's basically no holds barred. And, as I said, I think this film is generally well put together. It's well made, and it did keep me immersed from start to finish. The problem is this film has, just quickly going into the beginning, this film literally takes no time in getting started. This film is kind of, in a way, batshit crazy at the very beginning. The opening to this movie, and as soon as I saw the opening to this film, I'm like, this is 80s horror. This movie is very much an ode to giallo and 80s horror, and some of the aesthetics in there I absolutely love. Now, the actress name is actually escaping me. I think she actually does a really good job, actually, in the lead role. I can't really go into this, but basically with this film, the reveal, I went into this film expecting a twist. I thought there was going to be a big twist. And about halfway through the film, I kind of worked out what direction this was actually going in. And I proved to be, I was correct. But the problem is, it's so goddamn preposterous. It basically leaves with about, there's so many goddamn gaping plot holes. At the end of the day, every movie has plot holes. It is impossible virtually to create what you'd call a perfect movie. But the reveal, the big twist of this film, just completely gives us about a million plot holes. Just so many goddamn things that just don't make sense. And if you were to sit there and actually dissect this film, it just kind of falls apart. It just kind of falls apart at the seams. It really does. Yeah, it gets completely off the wall to the point of being pretty damn comical. Certainly in the final act. Certainly in the final. There's just so many things that don't make sense. But that said, at least James Wan was doing something a little different. As I said, it's very much a homage to Giallos of yesteryear. And he didn't want to just create your just, archetypal ghost movie like he'd done with, The Conjuring and whatever. But that said, I still enjoyed it. I still enjoyed the film. Even though I guessed what direction it was going in, which really doesn't make sense, it still kept me engrossed. Visually, I think it's great. As I said, the music, as I'm a huge Goblin fan, I'm a huge fan of Giallo, there was a lot of stuff in this film that I actually loved. It was like watching basically a modern kind of Argento film at times. And this is a difficult one to actually kind of rate, because I think it's a movie that had a lot of good stuff to it. I know the CG might have been really jarring to some people. There is a lot of CG. There is quite a bit of CG. I didn't find it overly jarring. I don't think the CG was like overtly terrible or anything like that. But there is a moment near the end of this movie that is just so, it almost feels out of place in the film. It really does. It's like James Wan was really trying to, in a way, cover different genres in this film. So it does end up becoming a little bit of it does end up becoming a mess, a bit of a narrative mess near the end of the movie, in the final act. But I can't help but say that I was entertained still. I don't think it's necessarily a bad film. It's just a movie that I would have liked. The fact that it was Giallo had me very excited, and them aspects I really did like. I would have liked this movie to have been somewhat more because there is certainly something in this film that does make no sense whatsoever. And as soon as it finished, as soon as we get the big reveal, I'm thinking to myself, well, how the hell did that happen then? How is that even possible? It completely falls apart, really. But, maybe if I wasn't the Giallo fan that I am, I would have liked it less. As I said, music, top notch, some great visuals. There's some very kind of Evil Dead-esque moments here as well. You can see that James Wan's really trying to be kind of experimental, if you will, with his fluid camera work and so forth. And overall, I enjoyed it, but I don't actually think it's a great movie. But it was certainly watchable. It certainly kept me entertained, and there are moments of genuine suspense. There are a couple of moments in this film in particular that I thought were pretty suspenseful. And, even though it's a James Wan film, you're expecting the jump scares and all this and that. I will be honest, it felt more refrained, it felt more restrained to me than a lot of other James Wan films. There are jump scares. There are moments you're just waiting for the big, and they do happen, but sparingly. I didn't think that there was. I don't feel like you were bashed across the head with jump scares in this film. So it's a really difficult one, actually. I don't think it's one of James Wan's best, but it's by no means his worst either. It is certainly his most preposterous. Like with Insidious, I really like Insidious. I do feel like the film kind of goes off the rails and loses its way somewhat towards the end. Um, this movie just, yeah. Of all of his films that he's directed, obviously, I mean, he's done Fast Seven and, Aquaman, which I still can't believe is the highest grossing film in the DCU, but, this was kind of like, in a way, keeping in his comfort zone with it being horror, but straying away from, without going into it, straying away from the more supernatural aspects of films like Insidious and The Conjuring and Dead Silence and that. But yeah, so that's pretty much all I want to say. I think it's worth a watch, but I'm not actually calling it a great film. So yeah, that's pretty much it for today. So thanks a lot for everyone that watched. Take care.